An understated sonder suffuses your somnambulance. The Moon Lord Gibby iterates upon prescribed gestures in his Baroque Hylium Xylem. Thus, your story begins. Hiya! I'm Ink, and welcome to my Nook. Hope you all are feeling nice and cozy today, and if not, grab some blankets and snuggle in. Today we have a bit of a different situation. This is actually a monster that I drew a while ago, and I wanted to give it new life in this show. I actually made it fresh off of playing Hylics 2, and having replayed that game recently, yeah, it is good brain soup. I highly recommend it if y'all like my art, as it's a huge inspiration behind my art style, as well as the reason I started my dive into surrealism. Also, Absent Moon is still one of my top played albums. Quick rundown of the games as they relate to this monster. Hylics 1 and 2 are indie RPGs with a surrealist art style. A world where people speak in either randomly generated nonsense or extremely obscure / complicated language, and it has a pretty simple story too. Wayne, our moon-headed protagonist, gathers up a group of people to take down the Moon Lord Gibby in Game 1, and in the second entry, the minions of Gibby threaten to revive him, so Wayne and the gang get back together to take them down. And that's the simple version of it, but with how much spice was put into this brain soup, you'll quickly see that there is a lot more there. So, for those of y'all who are tuning into this channel for the first time, this is a weekly monster making show where we go through the whole process, including art, lore, and a full monster card so that you can use these characters at your tables. With no further ado, let's march onward to the lore. So, I said earlier that the story is pretty simple as it is. However, Mason Lindroth and Chuck Salamone have been trip feeding the community lore. Turns out it's going to be a bit more story focused, and we already know some of the themes and the events that bridge between it and Hylics 2. At this moment, we can infer that Hylics 3 will be focused around the ending of the cycle of Wayne and Gibby. However, that will involve previous enemies becoming allies, and then the Waynes will mutate and become enemies. So let's run with that theme. This monster can be one of those enemies turned ally, not necessarily as part of the main cast, but as a shopkeeper / secret boss kind of character. One thing I noticed immediately is that this creature has no arms and legs. No way to make the gestures that are at the core of the Hylics power system. Being unable to engage in gestural combat, they opened a shop. Though, let's say that at one point, they were actually quite strong in fights. Actually, let's say that the reason they're weak is because their limbs were all cut off. With the afterlife pools not working the way we expect in Hylics 3, or maybe some other reason, the reconstitution of this character's limbs would be impossible. However, over the course of the game, the pools could either be restored or, actually, no, even better and more fun, the party could gain access to some sage / pre-accretion technology. Then, if our group of adventurers end up selling certain pieces of that tech to this shopkeeper, they would regain the limbs and gain hologram or phantom limbs. This could even lead to a boss fight where you have to destroy the shopkeeper's limbs to prevent them from going wild, or maybe defend against this merchant as a test to see how they feel with their restored powers. Alrighty, seems that we're set up pretty well with the lore. So before we move on to the monster card though, would you mind liking the video? Comment your sacrifices to the algorithm and subscribe. Of course, if seeing me in your feed doesn't work out for you, feel free to unsubscribe later. With all that out of the way, let's get to the monster card. For the name, let's try to do something a little fun and imitate the Hylician jumble of syllables that make up their names. But as usual, I'm not going to pull something out of a hat and just call it done. How about we take a couple of words related to the original name of this creature and jumble those syllables around? Well, starting with that original name, it was Flower Demon. So let's take a part of a flower and something related to demons. For the flower, let's use the sepal. It's the outer leafy part of the flower that protects the bud before bloom and supports the petals during the bloom. It especially fits with our creature's flower looking so leafy. Maybe the petals were already plucked. Something to go along with the loss of limbs? Next is the demon, and I'll be honest, the Ars Goetia is such an interesting book. I want to read it, and the name is so fun to say. So let's interlace and scramble some of the syllables from Sepal and Ars Goetia. Tepalgose seems foreign even into Hylics, though that's a pretty cool name. It fits with other names in the games like Pongorma and Dedismoln. So yeah, Tepalgose works. Next up are the abilities, or gestures in this instance. This again will be an exercise in thesaurusing. So let's pull some of my favorite words out to start. Sonder, hemorrhage, autodefenestration, discombobulate, cyst, flummox, hurly-burly. There are plenty of others, but these will work for now. Let's start out with hemorrhage. It has a really good mouthfeel and is pretty visceral. It means a huge damaging loss, or in medical circles, heavy blood loss. But I like the idea of hemorrhaging something not blood. So maybe air so you can't speak, or maybe bone marrow so you can't heal. Actually, that could be pretty fun, but well, no, that wouldn't be fun for a boss to do to a player. That would be fun for a player to do to a boss. So how about we go back to the list? Maybe we can get some inspiration from another word. How about sonder? It's a more obscure word that refers to the feeling that you get when you realize that everyone around you has a life story as real and as detailed as your own. So, hemorrhage sonder could be something that removes empathy. That could be something where actually allies are now hit by the effects of some abilities. Like if Link Mollusk, an ability that inflicts the same status effects on a party member to all of their opponents, could then hit everyone in the battle, including all other party members. Next up, I want to use flummox. That's such a fun word, meaning to bamboozle, befuddle, bewilder, or confuse. Then we can do buffoon, which is just another way of saying fool. And y'all might recognize a little bit of a reference creeping in there. I'll just say that it was intentional. Flummox buffoon is an ability that can confuse targets. Maybe we'll make it so that there's a chance that they use the wrong gesture. This could actually add to the mess that hemorrhage sonder would cause. If you get a widespread effect, well, there goes your party members. Finally, let's go for hurly-burly. That's a word that means to create a raucous, raging racket, a continuous series of loud noises. With hurly-burly, we need another word that has a similar mouthfeel. Oh, revelry, to celebrate. Hurly-burly revelry. This is a healing gesture that can clear everyone of status effects, including the party. That sounds pretty fun. Alrighty, now that we have the abilities, let's move on to the stats. As usual, we'll be using the D&D 5th edition stat spread, and the numbers will refer to the modifiers. Strength, -2. No arms and legs leads to pretty bad strength scores. Constitution, probably not that high, but not negative, so let's just go for a 0. Dexterity, again, no arms and legs, so we'll go for another -2. Intelligence, this is where we start seeing some real bonuses. Let's go for a 5. If y'all have ever played Hylics, you know that these folks have a thesaurus of complicated words built into their brains. Also, I like the idea that gestural combat is based on knowing how to do things, and with Tepalgose being somewhere near the peak of power in this area, it seems reasonable to max that out. Wisdom, pretty easily a 2, nothing too special, but still up there. You need to know what's going on in order to be a shopkeeper. Charisma, let's go for a 2 here as well. Shop owners need to be fairly charismatic. Also, pretty much everyone has Riz in Hylics, even Mistrum Heat Me, oh sun. Alrighty, with that, let's move on to the core phrases. These are short statements or questions that help guide DMs on how to run these monsters. Now, to go with the spirit of Hylics, I'm actually going to use the most obscure words I can for these phrases, but I will also provide translations and explanations for them. Also though, let me know in the comments if you understand any of these phrases without my translations. My inquest for restoration will not be perpetual. Translation: my search for healing will not end. Tepalgose has been looking for a way to regain their limbs for a long time, but they still haven't lost hope. They continue the search daily. The absurdity was an instrument of my deprivation. Translation: the absurdity was a large part of the reason I lost my limbs. Spoiler warning for Hylics 2, mute and fast forward if you want to avoid it. I'll edit in a visual sign to show when it's safe to unmute. Everyone gone? Alrighty. The absurdity, beyond being a reference to my favorite song in Absent Moon, is a term that I use for the effect that the Moon Lord Gibby's rule has on his subjects. His rule causes a spell of absurdity, spell being in the time sense, not the magic sense, where all the Hylicians speak gibberish and change their forms. Tepalgose went into one of those spells with all their limbs, but came out of it how they are now. The shopkeeper infers that the spell contributed to their loss and will do everything they can to prevent another one, including perhaps attacking the party of Hylics 3, since it's already confirmed that a number of them come from the allies of Gibby, who causes the spell of absurdity. So that was a lot of explanation to say Tepalgose does not like Gibby and will do anything to prevent another spell of absurdity, possibly including attacking the party if they are too closely associated with the Moon Lord. And here's the kicker. Good luck getting any sort of sense out of this. Even I don't really know these words. Commutations, subventions, peregrinations for espilement. Translation: selling things funds my discovery trips. This is the central motivation for Tepalgose, especially being a shopkeeper. They need to go out to search for ways to heal their limbs, but of course that's expensive, especially when you have no arms or legs. So they want to make as much money as possible to keep going on these trips. And that's that. Thank you all for joining me in this dip into the world of Hylics. I love the game so much, and if Mason Lindroth or Chuck Salamone sees this, thank you so much for making this world that I love and that continually inspires me. Take your time with the third one. Consider me hyped, and for everyone who sees this, I release Tepalgose to you to use at your tables. Take a look at Hylics and also check out my video remixing the worst concept in fantasy. With that, let's bring this video to a close. For those of you with dark skies, good night. And if you have bright days, good morning. Whatever part of the world you're from, I hope you have a lovely morning, afternoon, evening, and night. Goodbye!